billionaire CEO fired 10 tutors, then fell for the janitor who helped her son. Before we begin, take a moment to comment your city. Where are you watching from today? And once the story is over, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Now settle in and enjoy the story. The 8-year-old boy broke down in tears, his small shoulders trembling as the pencil snapped and rolled across the polished floor. Claire Donovan, the powerful CEO, in a sharp black suit, stood frozen, her eyes clouded with helplessness. 10 tutors, countless dollars, every promise, all had failed. And then at the end of the hallway, a striking contrast, Jack Miller, the middle-aged janitor, kneeling with a mop by his side. Before him lay only a few scattered bottle caps on the floor. Yet in his eyes glowed a quiet patience. In that moment, one haunting question rose and held every heart still. Why could a janitor accomplish what 10 professional tutors could not? Test papers were strewn across the long table under the cold white light. Red ink slashed through wrong answer circles carved around mistakes like wounds etched on the page. Claire sat there, head bowed, her hand gripping a pen so tightly her knuckles turned pale. This woman, once hailed as the queen of the business world, the one who could close million-dollar deals with a single phone call, now sat powerless before numbers her son could not understand. Beside her, 8-year-old Ethan buried his face in his small hands. His shoulders shook muffled sobs, echoing through the vast room, louder than any sound. Across from him, the chair sat empty, the place where tutor after tutor had once sat. The 10th had just walked out, leaving behind the same weary words. The boy is too difficult. I'm sorry, but I can't help him. Claire lifted her head, her eyes red and raw. The cold light revealed a cruel paradox, a CEO who could buy anything in the world, yet could not buy a single smile free of fear from her son. That moment made every listener pause, made them feel deeply the woman admired by the world was losing at the most important role, being a mother. And then Ethan whispered, his voice cracked with despair, I can't do it, Mom. It was in that very hopelessness that the path toward a destined encounter quietly began to open. Chapter 1. The Broken Pencils. The sharp crack rang out, the pencil snapped in two, half of it skittering across the polished wooden floor. Ethan, just 8 years old, flushed red with anger, his small hands trembling from frustration. Crumpled test papers lay scattered around him, the bright red marks bleeding across the page, circling his mistakes like wounds that refused to heal. I can't do it, Mom. His voice broke, echoing against the vast cold walls, bouncing back to him, as though even the house itself carried his despair. Claire Donovan, the woman the city knew as an iron-willed CEO, stood frozen. Her chest tightened. She was used to the sound of pens signing contracts, the applause in boardrooms. But the sound of her son's pencil breaking was the most painful sound she had ever heard. Claire bent down, picked up the broken half, and held it for a long time, as though she were holding the shattered pieces of her son's trust. She moved closer, knelt beside the desk, and wrapped her arms around him. But Ethan pulled away, hiding his face behind his hands. Don't make me do it anymore. I'm stupid. I'll never understand. His words came out in jagged sobs, each one cutting into her heart like a blade. Claire held him tighter, whispering, No, son. You're not stupid. You just need more time. Yet even as the words left her lips, she didn't believe them herself. 10 tutors, the very best money could buy, had already walked out. And each time the door closed behind them, hope closed with it. In the reflection on the glass table, she saw herself a powerful CEO, hair perfect, black suit, flawless. But the eyes staring back at her were empty, trembling, stripped of every ounce of confidence the queen of business was known for. Her hand smoothed his hair, but it was her own tears that fell. For the first time, she admitted defeat not in the market, but in motherhood. Her mind flooded with memories. The first day she called a tutor, Ethan sitting upright, eyes full of hope. But within days, that light dimmed, replaced by anxiety. One by one, they left all with the same excuse. The boy is too tense, too resistant. There's nothing more we can do. She remembered the look in Ethan's eyes that day. The look of a child realizing for the first time that adults could give up on him simply because he was too difficult. That same look now returned as he flung the pencil and cried out in despair. Claire pulled him into her arms, her breath unsteady. But the question beat inside her like a relentless echo. How could her own flesh and blood be considered hopeless? Her forehead pressed against his hair, a tear slipping down her cheek to mingle with his. Two streams of sorrow, one from a woman who had conquered the business world, one from a boy who couldn't solve a simple division problem. Both tasted the same hot, salty, and full of helplessness. Ethan pulled her hands away and looked at her directly. His blue eyes, once so clear, were now shadowed. If I can't learn, you'll leave me too. Just like they did right. His voice trembled with fear. Claire went still. She had thought failure meant a negative quarter report, a deal falling through. But now she understood what true failure was: allowing her son to believe she might abandon him. She clutched him close, whispering through her own sobs, "No, my love, I will never leave you. No matter how many times you fail, I'll still be here." But deep inside, she knew words weren't enough. Her son needed a miracle. Claire kissed his damp hair. The cold wind seeped in through the window, but in their embrace, there was still warmth. And in that fragile moment, listeners could feel it. Though powerless, a mother's love was still the only thread holding hope together. Across from them, the tutor's chair remained empty, silent, like an accusation. Claire stared at that void and saw her own failure reflected back. Her voice cracked into a whisper. "Maybe no one can help you?" Ethan buried his face again, his small shoulders shaking. Claire laid her hand on his back, feeling each ragged breath, each stifled sob. The grand, luxurious mansion suddenly shrank into a single dark room. Just a mother and her child facing a cruel truth. She gripped his hand, her eyes drifting toward the half-open door. She didn't know that just beyond it, fate was waiting a rough pair of hands, a handful of bottle caps, and the beginning of a way out. Chapter 2. The Man in the Hallway. Claire eased the study door open and stepped into the long hallway where the ceiling lights shimmered against the marble floor. She only wanted a breath of air, but then she heard a sound that didn't belong. Not the click of her heels, not the trill of a business call. It was the gentle clinking of small objects tapping together. She stopped. At the far end of the hall, a man in a faded gray-blue uniform knelt on the floor. The mop leaned quietly against the wall beside him. Lined up neatly before him were a few plastic bottle caps. Sitting cross-legged across from him was the gardener's little boy. his eyes bright with wonder. And there, guiding him with nothing but those caps, was Jack Miller, the janitor Claire had hardly ever noticed. For the first time in her mansion, Claire saw mathematics not on a whiteboard, not on a glowing laptop, but in something as ordinary as bottle caps. Jack picked one up, set it aside, and asked gently, "If you've got 4 caps and I take 2 away, how many are left?" His voice was slow and steady. 2, the boy answered, clapping his little hands against his knees. Jack smiled a humble, uneven smile, his rough hands still faintly scented with cleaning chemicals. "That's right. See, math isn't a monster. It's just little pieces that make up the whole. Like a pizza, it's easier when you slice it." The boy giggled, and Claire tilted her head, feeling her heart stir. 10 expensive tutors had never once coaxed a smile from Ethan over numbers. Yet here was a janitor with nothing but bottle caps doing just that. Her thoughts raced back to Ethan, curled up in the study, crushed by fear. What if her son were the one sitting here? Would his eyes shine like this child's? Jack carried on, unaware of her watching. He took a stub of white chalk and drew on the glossy floor, dividing a circle into 4 parts. "Here's a cake cut into 4 slices. If you eat one, how many are left?" 3, the boy cheered. Jack clapped. "Exactly." Laughter filled the hallway, echoing like defiance against the cold silence that usually lived there. Claire's throat tightened. In all her years walking these corridors, she had never heard a lesson so simple or a joy so pure. Then Jack looked up and caught her gaze. He startled quickly, setting the chalk aside. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I just wanted to keep him busy while his father worked." Claire said nothing at first. She glanced at the bottle caps, then at the boy's eager face. Between CEO and janitor, 2 worlds apart, there hung a long silence. And in that silence, Claire felt something larger than status, a fragile seed of trust glowing in a child's eyes. She thought of Ethan again, of the way he had cried, calling himself stupid. That image overlapped with the brightness on this boy's face before Jack. Her heart clenched. A question pierced her. Why had all these highly paid, well-credentialed tutors failed to reach her son, while this janitor with scraps of plastic could make numbers feel like joy? Claire, who had spent her life judging people by resumes' achievements, reports, suddenly saw the truth real worth wasn't in credentials. It was in the way someone could make a child believe he was capable. Her throat caught her eyes shimmering. For the first time in years, a small flame of hope flickered inside her right there in the cold hallway. Jack began gathering the caps. "You're really smart, kid. Remember, math is just your friend." The boy nodded, grinning ear to ear. Claire stepped forward, her voice rough. "Jack, would you try with my son?" Jack's eyes widened. He turned, and there was Ethan standing hesitantly in the doorway, cheeks wet with tears, eyes caught between fear and curiosity. The hallway fell into perfect stillness. On one side, a boy drowning in despair. On the other, a humble man with rough hands. And between them, a powerful mother, learning to lower her voice into a plea. What Claire didn't know was that her trembling question would become a turning point for all 3 lives, a fateful invitation for the man in the hallway to step into the heart of her family. Chapter 3. The Hardest Plea. Claire Donovan stood there, her hands trembling, even as she tried to keep the calm posture of a CEO. She had commanded hundreds of employees, negotiated with the toughest investors. Yet never had words felt this hard to say. Before her, Jack Miller, the middle-aged janitor in his faded uniform, still held the plastic bottle caps in his hands. He looked at her, confused, unsure how to respond to the request that had just escaped her lips. "Would you try with my son?" Ethan lingered by the doorway, his face streaked with tears. He watched closely, as if a single nod or shake of the head might decide his whole world. In that wide, echoing hallway, 3 lives stood suspended, power labor and childhood sharing the same heavy silence where even breathing felt like stone. Claire drew a deep breath. Pride fought inside her, but she pressed on. "Jack," her voice came softer than usual, not a command but a plea. "I've hired 10 tutors. 10. All of them gave up. My son, he thinks he's stupid. He's starting to believe he'll never be able to learn. Her voice faltered. There was no steel in her eyes now, only the trembling ache of a mother. "I don't need you to be a professor. I don't need degrees. I just need someone patient with him." Jack was silent. He glanced at the caps in his hand, then at the boy by the door. He gave a sheepish smile, scratching the back of his neck. "Ma'am, I'm just a janitor. I mop floors, fix bulbs. I'm no teacher. I can pull a few tricks to make kids laugh, but..." He stopped, his eyes catching Ethan's frightened ones. In that fear, Jack saw himself as a boy, mocked by teachers, convinced he'd never be enough. Ethan lowered his head, stepping back. Claire's heart clenched. She knew her son feared rejection once again. Jack recognized that trembling look, the very look he had once sworn no child under his watch should ever carry. With a long breath, he set the mop aside and beckoned gently. "Hey kid, come here. Let's just try once, okay?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at his mother. Claire gave a shaky nod, forcing a smile. Slowly, the boy padded forward and crouched before the line of bottle caps. Jack arranged 4 in a row. "Let's say these are 4 slices of pizza. You're hungry. I give you half. Half of 4 is what Ethan swallowed," whispered. To Jack's face lit with a grin, thumb lifted high. "That's right. You did it." For a brief second, Ethan's eyes flickered with light, then dropped quickly, as if afraid that hope would vanish. But Claire saw it. She saw what she had longed for, the spark of belief in her son's eyes. Her hands clasped together. She had witnessed quarterly reports flip losses into gains, but none had ever made her heart pound like this moment. Jack's voice flowed steady like water. "Now, if I take 1 more slice away, how many are left?" Ethan counted carefully. 1. There's 1 left. Exactly. The boy lifted his head, lips curling into a shy smile. Fragile, trembling, but it was the first smile she'd seen in months. Claire's hand flew to her mouth as her vision blurred. Her first tear fell hot against her cheek, and she realized happiness wasn't another contract signed, but hearing the small laughter of her child. As Ethan busied himself lining the caps again, Claire moved closer to Jack. Her voice quivered. "You see, he's smiling. He's never done that with anyone else. Jack, please, help him regularly. I'll pay you double, triple, whatever it takes if only you'll agree." Jack shook his head, his voice low but firm. "Not for money. I work this job to feed my family, but helping him, that's different. If I agree, it's because he deserves to know he's smart, not for any dollar bill." Claire stood speechless. She, who could buy almost anything, was hearing for the first time of something money could not touch: patience and faith. Jack turned to Ethan. "Kid, you want me to help again?" Ethan nodded eagerly, eyes glowing. Jack scratched his head, then smiled. "All right then, but we'll do it my way, slow. No yelling, no giving up. Deal." "Yes," Ethan burst out. Claire exhaled as though a boulder had lifted off her chest. She whispered, "Thank you, Jack. You have no idea you just saved us both." Above them, the ceiling light glimmered on the tiny caps, making them shine like jewels. And in that moment, the hallway of a cold mansion grew warm, 3 hearts meeting at one small intersection. The lesson was short, but the mark it left was not. Ethan clutched the caps as if they were treasure. Claire touched his shoulder gently. "See, you can do it," the boy whispered back. "Only when he's here." Claire turned to Jack, her eyes glistening. "From now on, think of yourself not as his tutor. No, as his guide." Jack bowed his head, murmured, "I'll try. But the most important thing is you must believe in him too, not just me." Claire squeezed her son's hand, whispering for the first time to herself, "I will believe, no matter what." That hallway, once filled with heels, clicking phones, ringing the hum of cleaning, now carried a new memory. A boy's laughter, pencils no longer snapping a mother's broken heart, quietly stitching back together. Claire rose, pulling Ethan into her arms. She turned to Jack. "Tomorrow, will you come back?" Jack smiled. "I'll be here, not because I have to, but because he deserves to learn in his own way." Their eyes met, not as employer and worker, but as 2 souls united for a child. In that moment, Claire understood sometimes salvation comes from the humblest place, from the person society overlooks. And she had found the courage to speak the hardest plea of her life, to trust a janitor with saving her son. Chapter 4: The First Smile. Jack crouched low, drawing a circle with white chalk directly on the marble floor. The line wavered, not perfectly straight like a teacher's hand, but honest and simple. He divided the circle into 4 parts. "This is a pizza," Jack said, his voice deep and warm. "You're hungry. If I give you half, how many slices would you have?" Ethan leaned closer, sweat still glistening on his forehead from the tears he had shed. His little finger traced the chalked circle, trembling. 1, 2. "I have 2 slices." Jack smiled and nodded. "That's right. Half of 4 is 2. You just did math." From a distance, Claire covered her mouth. It was only a simple equation, yet to her it felt like sunlight breaking through a heavy fog. She had waited far too long for this moment. Ethan still looked uncertain. He frowned at the circle, afraid he had guessed. "Are you sure?" "I'm right." His voice quivered. Jack nodded firmly, eyes steady. "Not only right, you just turned math into pizza. And who doesn't love pizza?" The boy let out a tiny laugh, a flicker of joy, like a sunbeam slipping into winter. To Claire, it was the first smile she had ever seen on his face at the mention of numbers. Tears welled in her eyes. Claire Donovan, the CEO, who never let rivals see her cry, now stood weeping quietly in her own hallway. Jack kept going, shading in 1/4 of the pizza. "If you eat 1 slice out of 4, how much of the pizza have you eaten?" Ethan tilted his head, blinking fast. 1/4, exactly. "And if I eat 1 more, that's 2/4. Jack leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "But 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Same pizza, just a different name." Ethan's eyes widened. Then suddenly, he burst into giggles. His laughter rang through the hallway, scattering the gloom that had long haunted the house. Claire pressed a hand to her chest, her heart pounding. In that instant, She wanted to fall to her knees, hold her son close, and hold the man who had brought him this laughter. But she didn't interrupt. She simply stood and watched an outsider in her own home realizing at last, sometimes loving your child means stepping back, letting someone else reach where you could not. She thought of all the times she had sat beside Ethan, forcing him to write, snapping in frustration, making him believe he wasn't smart enough. And now, with nothing but chalk and a pizza, Jack had undone her mistakes. Claire breathed deeply. Could it be? Had she been wrong all along? Maybe her son never needed an elite tutor, only someone patient enough to believe in him. Jack turned again. If the two of us eat all 4 slices, how many are left? None, Ethan shouted, laughing. Right, that's called 0, or a full belly. The boys' laughter echoed again, joined by Jack's. Then Ethan grabbed the chalk and drew a crooked pizza of his own. My turn. If there are 8 slices, and I eat 3, 5 are left. Right, Uncle Jack? Jack clapped his hands. Brilliant. You just made your own problem. Claire's eyes blurred with tears, yet her lips curved into a smile. She had never seen her son take the lead in learning before. When the lesson ended, Ethan threw his arms around Jack. You make math fun like a game. You'll come back, won't you? Jack paused, glancing at Claire. The powerful woman gave a solemn nod, whispering, Please, come back. Jack ruffled Ethan's hair, his voice husky. I'll be here as long as you promise not to fear math anymore. I promise, Ethan, cried, his eyes glowing with newfound belief. Claire stepped forward, laying her hand gently on Jack's shoulder. She needed no words. Her touch carried the weight of her gratitude. That night, when the house had gone quiet, Claire returned to the hallway. Chalk marks still lingered, the misshapen pizza half finished. She did not call for it to be cleaned. She sank down onto the cold floor, fingertips brushing over the chalk circle, feeling the soft dust cling to her skin. For the first time in years, happiness rose from something so simple. In the dark, Claire whispered, Thank you, Jack. You've shown me my son was never stupid. He was only waiting for someone to believe in him. The next morning, Ethan rose early, clutching the bottle caps to his chest. I'll wait for Uncle Jack, he murmured. Claire stood in the doorway, eyes brimming. The laughter from the night before still seemed to float in the mansion's halls, an echo no symphony, no boardroom triumph could replace. And Claire realized life could strip away wealth, trust, pride. But when a child learns to smile again, that is treasure beyond measure. Chapter 5. Lessons with Pancakes. The kitchen, once cold and silent, now glowed with an unfamiliar warmth. No longer hushed, it carried the sounds of clinking silverware, the smell of melting butter and sunlight stretching across the long wooden table. Claire stood at the counter, a coffee cup in hand, though untouched. Her eyes lingered on the rarest of sights, her son sitting upright, his face bright with anticipation. Ethan clutched a pad of blank paper waiting. Beside him sat Jack Miller, still in his simple janitor's uniform, carrying a small box with a few freshly fried pancakes inside. Claire thought quietly. It had been so long since her son's mornings had carried hope. For too many months, breakfast had meant only tears and heavy sighs. Jack placed one pancake on a plate. He took a knife and slowly cut it into 2 equal halves. Ethan, this is a whole pancake. If I cut it into 2 pieces, what do we call each part? The boy leaned forward, tracing the cut with his finger. 1/2. Exactly. Jack nodded, his eyes glowing with quiet pride. And if I eat 1/2, how much is left? 1/2. Ethan answered quickly, a confident smile on his lips. Claire covered her mouth, her heart tightening. Just days ago, this very question had ended in tears and screams. Jack reached for another pancake this time, slicing it into 4. If you eat 1 piece out of 4, what's left? 3/4. Ethan shouted with glee. His laughter bubbled up clear and ringing. He grabbed his paper and began sketching circles, dividing them into sections, numbering each one. Jack chuckled. Wonderful. You're not just eating pancakes, you're turning them into math. The boy laughed even harder, clumsily pouring syrup over 1 piece. This is your piece, Uncle Jack. Jack pulled a face in mock protest, and Claire let out a quiet laugh, an unfamiliar sound, even to herself. At the counter, she gripped her cup, her eyes shimmering. She looked at her son's radiant smile, then at Jack, the man society only labeled as janitor. And she understood, within those small smiles lay something money could never buy, the peace of a child's heart. She whispered, almost to herself, my son finally isn't afraid anymore. Ethan leaned forward with excitement. If I have 8 pancake pieces and I eat 3, how many are left? Jack smiled. Tell me then. 5/8, Ethan shouted, beaming. Claire nearly broke down, not because of the answer, but because of the confidence in his voice. Jack ruffled the boy's hair. Well done, kiddo. See, math isn't the enemy. It's just a tasty breakfast. Claire turned away, hiding a tear. She thought of herself, the woman who had turned everything into strategy, into contracts. She had forgotten that some things were never meant to be forced, only turned into joy. Jack wasn't only teaching Ethan math. He was teaching Claire, too, that patience was sometimes more precious than any diploma. The lesson ended with empty plates and crumbs scattered on the table. Ethan still giggled, chattering about pancake fractions. Claire moved closer, pulling him into her arms. This time, he didn't resist. You did so well, she whispered. Ethan looked up, eyes shining. It's because of Uncle Jack, Mom. Claire turned to Jack, giving a small nod. There was no longer a wall of rank between employer and worker, only the silent gratitude of a mother. The sunlight spilled across the table, catching on the empty plates, making them gleam like proof of the small miracle that had just unfolded. Chapter 6. Jack's Confession. The hallway was silent. The sound of children's laughter from the kitchen still lingered faintly, yet here the stillness returned. Claire Donovan leaned lightly against the marble wall, her eyes fixed on the man at the far end, slowly mopping the floor. Jack Miller, in his faded gray-blue uniform, moved with a patience that seemed to wash away not just dust, but fragments of a quieter past. Claire walked closer. The late light softened her face, loosening the rigid lines of a CEO. In her hands, there were no files, no phone, no shield of power, only the heart of a mother who had just watched her son beam with pancakes cut in half. She stopped beside Jack, her voice lowering into a tone she barely recognized as her own. Jack, may I ask you something? He looked up, surprise, flickering, then steadied. He leaned on the mop handle, exhaling, his eyes drifting toward the tall windows where the golden dusk spilled over the garden, as if searching for a memory long ago. Claire hesitated, then asked, Why are you doing this for Ethan? You have no obligation. You could ignore it, call it outside your work, but you stayed. You chose patience. Why Jack's silence stretched. The hallway swallowed every sound but the ticking clock. Jack didn't rush. He wrung out the mop, his rough, calloused hands trembling slightly. Standing still for a moment, he drew a deep breath before speaking. His voice was husky, slow, each word carved like stone. You know, when I was his age, I sat slumped over a desk, too gripping a broken pencil and shaking hands. And I heard the same words. You're not smart enough. You're hopeless. Claire froze. The words struck like a mirror held to her own pain with Ethan. She said nothing, but her eyes urged him to go on. My father was a construction worker. My mother waited tables. They left early, came home late. I was left alone with homework I couldn't understand. Numbers, twisted letters blurred like a foreign language. I remember once, the teacher asked a simple division problem. I stammered, couldn't answer. The whole class laughed. She shook her head and said in front of everyone, Jack, you'll never get math. Better stick to hard labor. His eyes stared into the distance, as if still seeing that boy abandoned in a classroom. Do you know what that feels like? To be defined by a single failure. They didn't see me. Only a clumsy, slow child not worth the effort. And I believed them. I believed I was stupid. Claire's throat tightened. Ethan's broken pencil. His cries of "I'm dumb" flashed in her mind. Her fingers gripped her blouse. Jack's voice pressed on, steady but glistening with tears. I dropped out early. Worked beside my father. Numbers haunted me. I dreaded them. Once at the market, my mother gave me money to pay. I got it wrong. The seller scolded me. Kids laughed. I ran hiding behind the shop, clutching those coins and crying. I felt small, useless, unworthy of trust. His voice caught, then steadied again. And then, one day, I met someone. An old man from the neighborhood. He wasn't a teacher, had no degrees. He sat with me, picked up stones from the yard, lined them up. He said, "Here, this is math. Just count the stones, split the piles. Don't be afraid, it's just play." For the first time, I understood. I smiled, and he told me something I never forgot. Jack, you're not stupid. You just need someone patient with you. Jack paused, eyes shining. Claire pressed her hands together, each word sinking into her heart. You see, Jack said, from that day, I made a promise to myself. If I ever found a child like me, I would never let them believe they were worthless. I'm no teacher, but I know this: if someone believes in them, the child will find their own light. Tears slipped down Claire's face. She stepped closer, touched his arm gently. Her voice trembled. You've kept that promise. With Ethan. You've given him the faith his own mother lost. Jack turned, meeting her eyes. They were no longer the eyes of an employee. They were the eyes of a man who had lived in darkness and now carried light for others. His voice lowered. That boy doesn't need a genius. He just needs someone who won't give up on him. And you saw it the moment he smiled. His whole world changed. Claire broke down, her body shaking. Never had she heard a lesson so profound, not in a boardroom, not in a report, but here from the confession of a janitor standing in her hallway under the golden dusk. She drew a breath, whispering, Jack, thank you. Thank you for staying when everyone else walked away. Thank you for believing in my son, even when I wasn't patient enough to believe. And in that moment, wealth, rank, status all dissolved. Only two souls remained, a mother reclaiming hope, and a man keeping the vow of his childhood. They stood together in the amber light. The hallway, bathed in sunset, became a portrait of a simple truth. Real worth is not titles or money. It is the promises we keep to our past and the hope we give to the present. And Claire knew with absolute certainty that her life and Ethan's would never be the same again. Chapter 7. The Test of Destiny. The white light from the overhead lamp spilled across the worn wooden desks. The classroom was hushed, broken only by the sound of pages turning and pencils scratching steadily. On the blackboard, chalk letters read math assessment, fractions and division. Ethan sat at the third desk by the window. The pencil in his hand trembled slightly, not with fear as before, but with focus. His eyes glimmered, brows knit in concentration. Ms. Henderson paced the rows, her gaze lingering longer than usual on Ethan's paper. She remembered too well the boy, once in tears burying his face or crumpling blank sheets in defeat. But today, something was different. Out in the hallway, Claire Donovan stood frozen. Her black tailored suit seemed out of place in the modest school corridor. Her hand shook around the strap of her purse, every tick of the hallway clock pounding against her chest. She closed her eyes, drawing a breath. She remembered nights of Ethan crying pencils, snapping torn test papers scattered. She remembered the tutors, each one leaving, each one saying, "I can't." And she remembered the moment she asked Jack, a janitor, for help, only to watch her son laugh again over pancakes and bottle caps. She whispered under her breath, "Please just give him a chance. Just once." Inside, Ethan lifted his head to the next question. A pizza is cut into 8 slices. If you eat 3, how many are left? A small smile tugged at his lips. He carefully wrote 5 to 8. And he told himself softly, "It's just pizza. Pizza isn't scary." He moved on. Another problem. Simplify 2/4. He inhaled, hearing Jack's voice echo. 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Same pizza, bigger slice. His pencil pressed down a 1-2. For the first time, his hand didn't shake with doubt. A classmate glanced over, surprised to see Ethan writing quickly. Once he had only sat silent, hiding his tears. But today, his eyes carried a new kind of confidence. Ms. Henderson paused as she passed his desk. Her breath caught at the clear, precise answers. Her mind flashed with old memories, calling Claire to school, again and again, telling her Ethan hadn't completed his work. But now, here was the same boy calculating carefully, even double-checking his steps. In the hallway, Claire pressed her hand against her chest. Through the small glass pane, she saw her son bent over his desk, lips, tight eyes alight. She couldn't hear him, but she knew he wasn't fighting alone anymore. With every number, she could almost see Jack's shadow, the man who had promised never to let a child feel stupid. Time crawled. Each tick of the clock was its own test, not just for Ethan, but for the mother outside. Claire pictured her son giggling over pizza fractions, cheering over 5/8 left. She smiled through her worry. Whatever the result, he's already changed. At last, Ethan set his pencil down and lifted his head. Around him, classmates still scribbled. He placed his small hand gently on the page, as if to be sure the answers were real, that they were truly his. A quiet pride rose in his chest. When Miss Henderson called "Time's up, hand in your papers," Ethan carried his sheet forward, laying it carefully on the teacher's desk. As he turned, he caught sight of his mother at the door. Claire quickly turned away, wiping her tears, but not before he glimpsed the trembling smile behind them. Recess came. Children filled the hallway, with laughter and footsteps. Claire waited as the classroom door swung open. Ethan ran to her, throwing his arms around her. "Mom, I did it," he cried, breathless but glowing. Claire knelt, holding him tightly. Tears streamed, but these were tears of relief. "I'm proud of you. So proud." A moment later, her phone buzzed. It was a call from Ms. Henderson. Claire answered, her heart racing. The teacher's voice came tinged with disbelief. "Ethan did so well, he even explained to his classmates. I can hardly believe it. But your son has truly changed." Claire stood speechless, watching Ethan skip along beside her. And she knew the test of destiny wasn't about numbers on a page. It was a test of faith, of patience, of love. Her son, the boy once broken over a snapped pencil, had risen head held high. In her heart, one thought whispered clear as day. "Thank you, Jack. You gave my son what no one else could." Chapter 8. The Math Fair Stage. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, and children filled the rows, the buzz of whispers mixing with the scrape of plastic chairs. Claire Donovan sat in the front row, her elegant black suit perfectly tailored, though her hands trembled as they gripped the armrest. Each passing second struck her chest harder than any speech she had ever given before a board of shareholders. Stage lights beamed down on the wooden platform. Ethan stepped out, his small legs shaking. He clutched a piece of chalk sweat glistening on his brow. The room hushed, hundreds of eyes fixed on him. Claire gripped the chair tighter, her heart whispering one raw question: can he bear this, or will it all collapse here in front of everyone? Ethan drew a breath and turned to the blackboard. His hand trembled as he sketched a circle, dividing it into 8 slices. The lines were crooked, uneven, but clear. His voice cracked through the microphone. If I have a pizza, cut into 8 slices, and I eat 3, how many are left?" A ripple of laughter rose from the back of the hall. A few parents exchanged mocking glances. Claire's blood rushed hot, her body shaking. But she never looked away from her son. "Hold steady, Ethan. Please." In that fragile moment, Ethan glanced out into the crowd. He caught his mother's eyes, wet with tears, but unwavering. Then further back at the edge of the room stood a man in a faded janitor's uniform, half hidden in the shadows. Jack. He smiled and gave a small nod. Ethan swallowed, steadied himself, and smiled back. He turned to the board, tapped the chalk on 3 shaded slices, and said with new strength, "That leaves 5. So, 5/8. The whispers died. He pressed on firmer now, and written as a fraction, it's 5/8. Same pizza, just fewer slices. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then suddenly applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling into thunder. Claire burst into tears, sobs shaking her shoulders. Her boy, the one who once broke down over a snapped pencil, now stood tall on stage, smiling. His voice carried smoother now than anyone expected. "My uncle told me, math isn't scary. It's like friends you haven't met yet. Once you understand, it never leaves you." The hall fell silent, spellbound. No more laughter, no smirks. Only stunned faces, eyes wide with wonder. Then applause again, louder, longer, filling every corner. Claire leapt to her feet, clapping, hard tears streaming freely. At the back, Jack stood still, eyes red, lips pressed tight to hold back emotion, yet pride curved at the corners of his mouth. Claire turned, noticing other parents lowering their gazes, some teachers nodding, humbled. She didn't care. Her eyes were only for the man in the shadows, who had brought her son this far. When Ethan finished, he bowed, then ran from the stage straight into his mother's arms. "See, Mom, I did it," he said, panting, glowing. Claire pulled him close, laughing through her tears. "I saw. You were wonderful." Then Ethan turned and darted toward the back of the hall, flinging his arms around Jack. His clear, proud voice rang out, "I couldn't have done it without Uncle Jack." The crowd gasped. Dozens of eyes fell on the janitor. Claire stepped forward, standing beside him. Her voice shook, but her words rang steady. "This man gave my son what money could never buy. He gave him faith, patience, and kindness." Silence swept the room. A few teachers bowed their heads. Parents exchanged glances. Their expressions softened. Jack shifted uneasy, ready to retreat, but Claire laid a hand on his arm, holding him still. Her whisper carried firm resolve. "Don't downplay it. You saved my son." Ethan clasped both his mother's and Jack's hands, his smile shining as bright as the stage lights above. Chapter 9. An Unusual Invitation. The spacious office was strangely quiet. No stacks of reports, no flashing data on multiple screens, no constant ring of phones. On Claire's desk rested only a slim folder and a steaming cup of tea. The powerful woman sat still, fingers entwined, her eyes drifting out the wide glass window as evening settled over the city. She wasn't thinking about contracts or numbers. She was remembering her son standing on the stage at the math fair, smiling with unshaken confidence. And she knew exactly who had made that miracle possible. A gentle knock. Claire looked up. Her secretary stepped aside, ushering Jack Miller inside. He froze for a moment, fingers nervously twisting the brim of his worn cap. The warm, light, polished wooden desk and quiet dignity of the office felt a world apart from the hallways and mop buckets he knew so well. Claire motioned for the door to close. Now, just the two of them. She rose, her smile softer than he had ever seen. "Please, have a seat," she said, not as a command, but as a genuine invitation. Jack perched uneasily on the edge of the chair, stiff-backed, his cap resting on his knees. "Ma'am, why did you call me up here?" Claire sat again, but didn't hide behind papers this time. She leaned forward, her gaze direct, her voice sincere. "Jack, I want to thank you, not as a CEO, as a mother. You accomplished what 10 top tutors could not. You made my son believe he is smart. You saved him." Jack bowed his head, his voice thick. "Ma'am, I only did what I promised myself long ago. I wasn't thinking of anything but the boy." Claire nodded slowly. "And that's exactly what makes you different." She slid the folder toward him. "I'm launching a program for employees' children. Not just another class. A place where kids are encouraged to believe in themselves, to learn their own way, without ever being branded as stupid. And I want you to lead it." Jack's eyes widened. He stammered, "Me, but I'm just a janitor. I don't have teaching credentials. I've never managed anything." Claire's smile sharpened, but warmed. "Do you think I'm looking for degrees?" "No, Jack. I'm looking for someone who knows what it feels like to be dismissed, and who still chose to believe every child has worth. You've lived it. You recognize the fear in their eyes, and you know how to turn that fear into laughter." Jack sat silent, his throat tight. He stared at his rough hands, cracked, scarred, stained from chemicals. These were not a teacher's hands, nor a leader's. He shook his head. "I'm afraid I'll let you down. All I know is mopping floors, fixing light bulbs. Claire rose and came around the desk. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, her voice soft but weighty. Jack, you don't just mop floors. You wiped fear from my son's soul. You don't just fix light bulbs. You lit up his heart. And I believe you can do that for many more children. Jack's eyes shimmered. He looked up and saw not the cold CEO, but a mother offering him her trust. His voice cracked. You really think I can do this? No, Claire said with a radiant smile. I know you can. I've seen it. And Ethan, he is proof. Silence filled the room, wrapped in the golden glow of sunset. Jack looked out the window at the city lights flickering on people moving like tiny dots below. He thought of himself always a shadow in the hallway, unseen. And now, a door had opened so unexpected, he could barely believe it. He picked up the folder, flipping through sketches of classrooms' plans for support programs. In Claire's handwriting along the margin were the words, "Faith first, knowledge will follow." His vision blurred. Setting the folder down, Jack drew a deep breath. I'll try. Not because I think I'm skilled, but because I don't want another child to cry the way I once did. If you truly believe, then I'll do it. Claire squeezed his shoulder gently. I don't just believe. I'll walk with you. We'll do this together. For Ethan, and for so many children. Something broke open inside Jack's chest. He had never imagined stepping beyond the mop, beyond the quiet corridors. Yet here in this office, he was given the chance to turn his pain into light for others. Outside, the sky deepened into night. But in that room, the glow seemed warmer. Claire signed the first document to launch the project. Across from her, Jack still trembled, but within him, a new fire had begun to burn the fire of faith, born from an unusual invitation that would change his life forever. Chapter 10. The Paper with an A. The grand living room, once so empty, now pulsed with hurried footsteps and the bright sound of a child's laughter. The door burst open, and Ethan came running. His small hands raised high, holding a single sheet of paper. His eyes sparkled as if they carried the whole sky. Mom, look, I got an A. I got an A. The test still smelled faintly of chalk. The bold red letter A at the top corner gleamed like a shaft of light piercing through months of darkness. Claire Donovan dropped the file she was holding and rushed forward. She knelt, pulling her son into her arms. Tears spilled, but not the tears of helplessness. These were sweet, weightless tears of relief. Ethan, I'm so proud of you. You did it. Her voice trembled, her hands gripping his shoulders as if to carve this moment deep into her heart. Ethan chirped, I remembered what Uncle Jack taught me. I just thought of pizza and pancakes. Math isn't scary anymore, Mom. He laughed, the pure sound filling a house that had long been starved of joy. At the doorway, Jack Miller stood quietly. His janitor's uniform was plain, his rough hands clutching an old cap. He didn't step inside. He only watched the boy, who once broke down over a snapped pencil, now lifted a paper marked with an A. A gentle smile spread across Jack's face, steady and kind. Claire turned, meeting his eyes. In that moment, she didn't see a janitor. She saw a teacher, a savior, a part of her family. She nodded, her lips trembling, as she whispered her gratitude. You did what no one else could. Thank you, Jack. Jack shook his head, his voice low and steady. No, ma'am. He did it himself. I only showed him the path. He walked it on his own. Ethan ran over, thrusting the paper up. Look, Uncle Jack. You said I was smart. Right now, I believe it. Jack bent down his rough hand, brushing Ethan's soft hair. I never doubted you. And now, you see, I was telling the truth. Claire stepped beside them, the sunlight spilling through the windows, bathing the three of them in gold. A powerful CEO, a humble janitor, and a boy once broken by fear. Together, they stood united by nothing more and nothing less than a single paper marked with an A. The room grew still. Claire sat on the sofa, pulling Ethan into her lap. He placed the test proudly on the glass table like a trophy. She smoothed his hair, her eyes still wet. Ethan, do you know what today? You taught me something greater than contracts, greater than numbers. You taught me that faith can change a life. The boy tilted his head, smiling. Like Uncle Jack believing in me. Yes, Claire whispered, holding him tighter. And from now on, I will always believe in you too. Jack stood silently, his heart strangely warm. He had never imagined such a day when a boy would beam with an A, when a powerful mother would weep with joy, and he himself would stand witness to it all. Claire knew then her greatest victory wasn't a $1 million deal, but her son's smile. And Jack understood his richest reward wasn't money, but the light of trust in a child's eyes. Outside, the city lit up with night, but inside this home, the light had long since returned, brought by a simple paper with an A. The final image lingered, Ethan raising the test high, Claire clutching him close, and Jack standing in the doorway with a gentle smile. The evening sun spilled across them, turning an ordinary moment into something eternal. A small family, a great faith, a lesson never forgotten. The Donovan mansion no longer echoed with snapping pencils or muffled cries. Its marble halls now glowed with children's laughter. In the living room, golden light wrapped everything in warmth, transforming the cold house into a true home. Claire glanced at Jack, her smile no longer the polished smile of a CEO, but the honest smile of gratitude. Her voice, soft but resolute, carried the truth. Real wealth is not in bank accounts. It is in the faith and kindness we give one another. Ethan looked up, his eyes wide. So, we're rich now. Mom Claire hugged him close, smiling through tears. Yes, my love. We are richest when we trust and love. Jack bowed his head, a quiet smile at his lips. He needed no more words, for this moment was the greatest reward of his life. From bottle caps and pancakes to a single paper marked with an A, their journey had proven this wealth is not power or money. True wealth is found when we dare to give faith and kindness. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the next story, where we continue to share tales of love, faith, and everyday miracles. Our latest stories are waiting. Click here to watch more now.